ist jetzt so, ich habe ganz viele Bilder und da gehe ich ganz schnell durch, weil dann ist das für Sie ein bisschen, als ob Sie unsere Sammlung besuchen, wo ich immer eigentlich zu viel Arbeiten auf den Tisch lege. Und wie bei Tilo ist das bei mir auch so, dass Englisch meine Arbeitssprache ist und ich halte das jetzt auf Englisch oder ich gehe vor und zurück zwischen beiden Sprachen. Ich habe meinen Titel nochmal geändert, weil der Rüdiger dachte, Punk 101, das wäre vielleicht unverständlich in dem Kontext hier. Also das ist der neue Titel. Und bevor ich über Zines spreche und was wir haben, das sind also die Themen, die ich mal kurz bespreche, weil Rudiger dachte, es wäre für Sie interessant zu sehen, wie die Sammlung zugänglich ist. Die Künstlerbuchsammlung, da sind die Zines ja Teil davon. I'll describe how what I collect is mapped along the educational mission of the School of the Art Institute, how patrons access our holdings, how public programming helps expand our audience and contributes to the cultural context of Chicago. And then the second part of my talk is focused on zines, how they fit within a collection of artist publications and into the school's curricular goals, what types of zines I collect and why. So these are the various formats that I collect, except for livres d'artistes, or those fine press books. All of those, I think, fall under the umbrella of artist publications, and we have examples of all of these. So it's art, digital works, iPad apps, multiples, poster, ephemera. Especially the etc. is important. The majority of our holdings are paper-based, bound and printed in some form or another, but we have examples of all of these. And of course, many times they come in combination with each other. It's of no concern to me whether something has been produced in a large edition or is one of a kind. If we focus on large editions, then solely for budgetary reasons. In addition to the artist's books, we hold mail art and artist stamps, reference books, exhibition catalogs, if they are works of art in themselves. So all in all, that's a collection of about 15,000 titles. This will be our first artist's book fair in Chicago. Usually I go to one in New York in September. This will be in November, but Chicago has a long history of book and artist book production. The collection includes local artists' books, but our focus is international in scope, as is our student body. At the moment, I try to find work from Southeast Asia and from Mexico primarily. The library began collecting in the 1970s with fluxus and conceptual art as movements that heavily relied on publication as a container. It's hard to see on the right, that's Art by Telephone, a vinyl record, beautiful record. It was a show at the MCA in Chicago where the artists called in the parameters for the work that was to be installed. It sounds like they're calling from outer space. So initially the works circulated with all other books, so all our Rochers and Baldessaris are embossed and stamped and defaced, which has the benefit that no one wants to steal them. Eventually someone recognized their value, pulled them, they were no longer accessible, almost not findable except for a title and artist list. And then as Joan Flash, after whom the collection is named, she was a staff member, she died very young, and then the collection was formed as a separate unit within the library. Of all the special collections and archives that I oversee, it's the one that is most heavily used, and throughout the fall and the spring semesters, we host one group after the other in addition to individual walk-in patrons. So this is what the reading room looks like before someone comes in. We're open to the public at no cost from Monday through Saturday. No prior arrangements are necessary. And for anyone who walks in the door unannounced, we make the visit as enjoyable and as easy as possible. All they have to do is wash their hands, use pencils, and then they can ask for as many titles as they want. This is what it looks like when the class is in session. They come from a variety of departments of the school, as well as from all other institutions throughout the Midwest. And each group gets the same personal, time and labor-intensive introduction before we let them browse through the collection. This is one from last week. The class title was Music in Art. So while they were looking through books, we had all our Bikini Kill punk music blasting. So it was fun. And then that's what it looks like after they left. So here's one single statistics slide, just so that you know how busy we are. This commitment to not only serve our own students, but also the general public influences my collection activities and our exhibition and events programming. Just so you know, staffing is minimal. Up until 5 years ago, this was a one-woman show, so now I have an assistant, and then there's about 10 student workers, volunteers, interns. Yeah, 21,000 books pulled and shelved. That's good. This is what our database looks like. So it's fairly visual. You can, on the top, you can see, you can obviously browse by search term, by artist. So if I were to put in the search term zines, I would get at the moment 935 results. There's about 1,000 waiting to be cataloged. And then all they have to do is click on the individual record, and then this is what a record would look like. We try to have fairly lengthy notes fields so that whatever a patron might benefit from viewing, that word shows up in the description. So we take great pains to create these records. And then all the patron has to write down is the accession number, and then they get the work. We also have a list of about 90 search terms: binding, visual analysis, materials, printing method, and those can be combined, so that helps people. So just a few words regarding the institutional context. This is the school's official website. This is how they sell themselves. Concepts of exploration, curiosity, and the desire to partake in Chicago's cultural context are the core institutional goals, and those provide the parameters for how we in the library develop our various collections. Within the institution as a whole, we're partnered with the Art Institute, the museum. We share the same administrative umbrella. There are, of course, other departments focused on edition art, like the prints and drawings collection in the museum, and their reading room is much nicer than mine. There are other special collections within the school that overlap with what I have. Here's the video data bank, also a beautiful website if you want to look at video as an art form. And then there are other special collections and archives within the library related to the production and dissemination of artist publication. The reading room is not only used to view artist books, but also the space we use for public events, performances, film screenings, lectures, critique sessions, readings, and symposia. And Rudiger already mentioned, this is Mark Fisher, a friend of mine. He came for about 2 hours, brought his own collection. He's a friend of Renaud Richard, and talked about elles sont de sortie, and showed his own collection. The tables were full of this stuff. Once a week, we have something that we call lunchtime listening, because we have a fantastic collection of vinyl records that no one really ever comes to listen to. So we just select what we would like to listen to ourselves, and then just play. The reading room has speakers, and then the students either come in and eat in the room, or they sit outside and listen. So here are a few examples of programs. Kamal Patton is a VCS, Visual and Critical Studies faculty member, and we closely work with him. Here he brought in his tape collection, tape recordings focused on Chicano experience in the US. Or Cecilia Vicuña, who once came to the room to give a lecture. So then we just show the books that we have and we listen to her vinyl. We also do 16mm film screenings, because that's nice to hear a film projector. And because the 16mm films are only shown within the film department, this is a way for all students to come in and listen and view these films. Whenever we have events, we usually tape readings or lectures. So the school has a Vimeo channel, which you can browse through, where those are housed. Okay. However, gaining access to material is not just about viewing books and objects or browsing through a database, but it includes tapping into the knowledge of my assistant and I. Months before each semester begins, we go through the course offerings as they appear on the school's official website, and we do that for each and every discipline. If a particular synopsis, so that's what's coming up in the fall, if I look for books and publishing, there will be 48 courses offered that somewhat are related to books and publishing. And if any one of those classes sounds promising in the sense that I might have material to contribute to the class, I'll get in touch with the instructor, I'll email them, alert them to our holdings, request a syllabus so that I can get more information about what the class really is about. And that really covers a lot of departments: print media, writing, photography, fiber and material studies, art history. Really, there are very few departments in the school that I don't have anything to offer to. And then after I've gone through the syllabus, so these are the descriptions as they appear on our website, and I look through all of them, each department. And then I make a selection of material, and the instructor comes in and previews it, or they just trust us and they add a visit to the collection, to the syllabus. In this case, the instructor gave me very specific topics for each student, so each student got 5 pieces to look at that really was critical for their own work. This is an app class, an iPad app class. They maybe use us the most, maybe because they're tired after a day of moving pixels around. They really want to hold something in their hands, but then also because they use the structure, the architecture of an artist book to map the experience of a viewer looking through the apps. And then I end up buying or buying the apps or they give them to me. This was a class called Media Archaeology, so they helped me deal with media that I can no longer play on the platforms that I have, like all these CD-ROMs I bought in the late 1990s. I'm also part of a faculty senate group that looks at course proposals. So these are courses that are being suggested that won't actually start until a year from now. So this way I know what's coming down the pipeline and I can already look for material. I have a whole year looking for material that will be critical for a specific class. Once the semester starts, I'll take part in on-campus orientation workshops, or I host them in the collection, which is generally my first contact to new faculty members, who all have to come through, who all get an introduction to the collection, and then I meet most of the master's students. And then a visit to the reading room is mandatory for the more than 40 research studio classes taught in the Contemporary Practices department, which allows me to reach all undergraduates within the first few weeks of their time on campus. So I can show the materials I have to all of those. It gives me a full hour where I can get them excited about the material we collect, and I explain to them how they can self-initiate a publication education project at any point in their studies, and that museum and gallery representation is not the only way to find an audience. It's kind of what Martin said, that it's not necessarily that you will not get gallery representation, but it's also, you might find other ways that are more desirable to begin. We also have 4 display cases. These are some of the shows of the last month. Mostly we use material from our own collection. 4 of these cases were, unfortunately, the material is behind glass. As of this year, all our shows are up on the website. We use Omega for that, and you can search by show. The nice thing about it is it gives you a description of what the exhibition was about, and then you see for each case which books we showed. You click on the link and it takes you directly to the catalog, and you see the description of the book, and you know which number to request should you want to look at it. A lot of the exhibitions are student initiated. This was an exchange student from Italy who is Black and was talking about her experience as a Black Italian in Chicago. This is my assistant, Bela, who then usually, because we hate when books are behind glass, who then organizes a satellite show in the room on the windowsill so that people can actually touch the material as it is intended to. Sometimes we host traveling shows. This was with Cornelia Lau on certificates, artists' certificates, which allowed me to install this Lawrence or we have exchanges, this one with NYU, the Fales Library. Our material went to their spaces and they gave us these warm notebooks. Or I use the school gallery spaces. This was an exhibition I curated on exhibition catalogs as works of art. There was no money for a catalog, so we had to make a prototype. My husband did, he sits there in the back, and then sell the catalog. And this was before Kickstarter existed, but we sold the catalog before we actually made it, and then eventually we had enough money to produce it. The interface for the catalog was quite beautiful. There were these gray shadows of catalogs. You had to grab them, and then the record would pop up, and it allowed me to interview Christian Boltanski, whose work I always cherished. Once a week I sit downstairs right next to the cafeteria, what we call the publications clinic, where anyone can just walk up to me with a publication project, whether it's still in its infancy, just really just a concept, whether it's halfway done or whether they have something in their hands that they want to sell. And then I just give them my input. And like Rudiger said, sometimes I teach. This is our Biblio du Livre event. This was the second time we did that this year. We give the students prompts to use the library in unconventional ways. We turn them into aimless flaneurs, and chance encounters with material they haven't expected can become possible. So it's this ski de bord, flâner, situationism idea of using the space in ways that is far more self-driven than a regular research consultation, and then eventually a research project would look like. We create these cards of prompts. This is especially for the younger students helpful, and then they really just are let loose, and they very much enjoy it, and we enjoy it too. We give them a map of all the different stations where stuff has already been suggested for them to do, but they can come up with their own project at any time. There's a website prior where they can make suggestions on what they want to do in the library. As for special collections, we called it Adrift in the Archives. We had objects out and made photographs and scans, and they could either paint over them, or they could perform with the object, or they could read poetry to the object, whatever they wanted to do. The last time we did it, it was mail art, so they created actually mail art pieces to male artists that we had an actual postal address for. So, and then we promised that, and we did, that we would mail out the pieces to the artists. These were the objects we put out. These were the students. The nice thing is we created this, what we call the archive as artistic practice, where we documented what the students made, which you see here. It describes what the work is based on, and then links you to that original piece in the archive. So you have the work of the student linked back to the archives. And then this, as an example, sometimes I go out into the community. This is a group of handicapped adults who make art. So then I took a suitcase of artists' books, showed it to them, and then they made an artist's book, and then there was a big release party. Just to summarize, all my public program is mapped along the school's curricular efforts, and I try to cultivate diverse on-campus connections outside of the library, outside of the reading room, by taking as many approaches as possible so that we can go beyond our user groups already familiar with what we have to offer. What I collect reflects upon the school's culture and leads to a better understanding and appreciation of artists' publications in general. And we also have a Facebook page that you can like, and we post to it pretty much on a daily basis. So this was the class I mentioned earlier on. I want to cultivate an audience that keeps coming back, that knows we are a place for research and investigation, and also a possible repository for their work. Okay, and now I'm going to get to the zines. I don't know how I'm doing time-wise, but I'm being fast. It continues to be revelatory, especially for young artists who use our holdings, that they do not need to wait for gallery representation to get their voices heard, that they can take matters into their own hands at any point and start to publish, and that there's no reason why they should have to restrict themselves to one particular format or medium only. There are many well-respected predecessors in the field whose toolkit covers a wide variety of disciplines and who choose from a sizable number of hats. They paint, they photograph, they perform, they make installations, and they make zines. So what I frequently see associated with the format zine includes that it's self-published. The self-published work of an individual. It should be inexpensive, which is not a very precise term, and last time I bought zines, they were actually quite pricey. They were in the $20–25 range. Definitely not throwaway aesthetics, or at least I don't throw away $20 books. It should be self-published either by an individual, maybe it could be a collaboration, maybe issued by a small press, but definitely lacking third-party editorial oversight. Ideally, a zine is of somewhat obscure origins. It should be simple. There's an expectation of a certain poverty of means, of production means. Images and text are cut and paste, either physically or digitally. However, what I find is that a lot of zines today have been printed and constructed in quite elaborate ways. And they shouldn't exceed a certain heft and size. Ideally, they consist of only one single signature, staple bound, and yet plenty of zines break that rule. They're supposed to be personal and passionate rather than a literary endeavor, sometimes even an improvised work of art, available directly from the person who created them or distributed them in independent channels. And lastly, they draw heavily from a DIY vocabulary. They are part of a do-it-yourself counterculture at the confluence of easy access to printing equipment and a willingness to speak up. I've been interested in DIY culture for quite some time. Here's an exhibition I co-curated where the catalog consisted of no more than a folded cardboard sleeve and a thumb drive, a stick. All entries into the show had to be self-produced and came with an instruction set so that the visitor could collect those that were of interest to them, assemble for themselves their individual catalog, and then recreate the pieces. So this was the stick. The show was called Pass It On. There were monitors, so you could just put it in and just grab all the instruction sheets you were interested in. collecting, there was an instruction sheet how we use the gallery. As you can see, there was a timeline of DIY culture. There were video interviews with people who were important in that field. There was an instruction how to assemble the catalog. And then all around were the individual pieces. There was literature. The pieces ranged from self-made musical instruments to a woman who makes jeans, starting from spinning the thread, dyeing the fabric, and sewing the pants, or a Mexican artist who made lamps out of this sugary substance they use for skulls for Day of the Dead. So if you're tired of the lamp, you put it out into your yard and it just melts away. These were the catalogs. But do zines really have to be self-published or produced by a small press? Could it be a gallery, a curatorial team? Self-publishing, small publishing, independent publishing, the terms intermingle. What stays the same is the concept of controlling the means of production. This is a local zine store in Chicago called Quimby's, and that's how they define it. I like the rhymes with zine. So this was the earlier diagram I showed you. I realized that this is totally wrong. This is how it's a little more accurate in the sense that zines overlap with quite a variety of different publication formats. I'm not sure if they are a subset of artist books or if they're on the same level, but all these other, and we collect all of them, they definitely have areas of overlap. And there's definitely this idea of moving from the literary more towards the visual and moving from high production value more towards low production values. So clearly not everything that is single signature and staple bound is a zine, or what should we call it, 100 staple bound booklets that backed up the Documenta 13 broad curatorial vision. Some of them very much combine visual and textual work. They are passionate and personal, and at some point anyway, they were quite cheap. Was Boltanski maybe a zinester and didn't even know it when he passed around pamphlets early on in his career, completely delighted, as he told me, to have free access to a photocopier in the institution where he taught at the time, and then those were later compiled and reprinted into this box set. Agnes B's Point d'Ironie, which I saw in the reading room, is not just cheap, but in fact given away for free. But it could also be called a folded poster, a pamphlet, or is it ephemera? And then some publications call themselves zine in the title, but have more or less the appearance of a book. Like here's Dexter Sinister, which no longer exists. This were two guys in New York, ... a series of books. Raw Fury, a collaboration between Press Denver and Flatland Studio Chicago, which calls itself a zine, but looks more like a traditional art magazine, and features a mix of contemporary street art and comics. Each issue is printed in an edition of 150 and includes a letterpress insert, so that maybe speaks to your question earlier. There's a lot of letterpress, at least in our town, still around. And then once zines get reprinted in book form, the line between them and artists' books becomes even less distinguishable. Here's the 2006 printed Matter Art Metropole republication of This is the Salivation Army, which reprinted all issues from 1996 to 2006 with additional text and drawings. So these were zines focused on gay activism. So Harry Hu came up earlier with Jim Nutt. Certainly could be called a graphic zine. Harry Hu also functioned as an exhibition catalog. They had shows at the Hyde Park Arts Center. Harry Hu was a group of artists, part of the so-called Chicago Imagists. Many of them, if not all of them, graduated from SAIC in the mid-1960s and then later taught, or some even still teach to this day, at the school. So I'll just flip through a few pages of that. they're quite beautiful. It's a more contemporary version. His name is Joe Tallarico. He calls it Hairless Who, in reference to the Hairy Who publications. He calls it a visually focused comic series. He approaches the comic book as if it's drawing or painting. This is Ediciones Yocto. These are beautiful, oversized, screen-printed zines. And then this is Gato Saurio by Ines Estrada. She worked originally from Mexico City, but she currently works in San Antonio in Texas. We have a series of her zines called Alienation and 6 Mass Distinction. Oops, that was a little question. This is Andrew Holmquist. It's a very beautiful box, as you can see, about this large, and it has 10 different zines in it that you then pull out. They're all Riso printed, which a lot of our students use. So these are 2 of them. They all have very different topics. There are at least short narrative. There's definitely a narrative quality to them. And this is Tanami Kaichi. I didn't know I would see Stéphane Blanquet's work when I assembled the slide deck, but it's United Dead Artists, Stéphane's imprint. This is Sergei Vutuk, a Serbian artist, born in Bosnia, raised in Croatia, lives in Berlin. He makes installations. He's very much tied into the punk zine and skateboard zine. I think there's one image out here, you see it. He's a skateboarder. Layers these images that give it a sort of fast, speedy feel. I'm going hopefully not too fast. Yeah, I have to go a little over since I started so much later. This is LDOC, a couple of Chicagoans, so this is not only cheap, it's given away for free. It was a one-year project where they always paired 2 artists for 1 month, and it was given away on the subway or left on seats on the subway. This is the Testament Project by Kim Graves, an exploration and reconception of the contemporary Black experience in America. More often than not, Black people are portrayed in the extreme, either as very rich or famous, demonized, infantilized, ridiculed, idolized, or hypersexualized. And within the art canon to this day, there's a noticeable scarcity of Black representation. So she gives the people she portrays, she gives them say over how they are shown, how they are lit. We hold works that point to music fandom, clearly. As a woman trying to find a space for herself in the 1980s art world, we had plenty of reasons to position ourselves outside of mainstream culture. Some found uncharted territory in performance video and in the book arts, yet women remained largely invisible within the male-dominated punk scene or were registered as a substrate, at best an aberration. Femzines came to serve as a loud, angry, sometimes deliberately vulgar response to punk's sexism. This is Bitch magazine. It has been around forever and still in print, and there's bust. So girl zines are in fact not a side note to punk scenes at all, but rather a site where third wave feminism could develop and break from women's rights discourse of the past, which it perceived to be oppressive in its uniformity of class, race, and gender identity, and the strict rules it set for appropriate feminist behavior. While third wave feminism separated itself from its predecessors, it nevertheless embodied a type of resistance that traces a continuous arc back to the mimeographed newsletters and pamphlets from the 1960s and 70s, and then further back into the past, to the informal publications of the first suffragists and the scrapbooking. Clearly inspired by feminist literature that came before them are zines like Nomi Lam. Nomi Lam, also a punk artist, a musician, a poet, a riot girl, a performance artist. I'll just race through. Super simple, a photocopied, stripped, tiny little booklet. While feminine girl zines battle to this day against the undying violence of sexism and against concepts of womanhood that are as undesirable as they are unattainable, they no longer do so in a monolithic and unified group. Rather, they embrace and shed light on divisions of race and gender identities with the goal to counteract all and any types of oppression. Shikis She Heart means my friend, my heart in Navajo. So these are two women of indigenous background. They make a series of zines from a Native American lens. This is Shotgun Seamstress, that is about black queer punk. Not three words one necessarily connects easily. It discusses the difficulties of being a black person within a dominantly white punk and queer scene. It's a very informative zine. This is OOMK, One of My Kind. It calls itself a zine. It's produced biannually in London by Sophia Niazi, Rose Norden, and Hiba Kamara. The publication features work by women and seeks to explore topics of faith, activism, and identity with particular attention to female Muslim zinesters. They include interviews, poetry, drawings, photography, illustration. These are the three names. So this is a zine about zines in Malaysia. I'll go really fast. This has these beautiful little fold-out strips. On the left is Hardworking, Good-Looking, the publishing and design arm of OCD, Office of Culture and Design, in the Philippines. And then, since 2010, Hardworking, Good-Looking came 3 years later as their publication arm. They make zines. On the right is Pisau Timur, which means knife and cucumber. It comes from Singapore. I have two images. I'll probably leave out ISCA, even though I would love to talk about it, but there's one zine I definitely want to talk about. ISCA was the International Society of Copy Artists who made a periodical, but then also made these zine boxes, really great boxes. Everyone could submit. She made it in an edition of 150, and then you would get a box. There are also self-help zines and mini comics, which I will also skip. Back. These are the Zine Fest posters. This is what the Zine Fest looked like just a few months ago. This is one of our faculty members. Temporary Services, that's Mark Fisher and one other person we've now talked already about. Mark Fisher, Temporary Services is a group who very much mixes life and art, who, as you will see here, produce pamphlets and zines, who collaborate with prisoners, who set up a Rizzo station in museums and publish. They have a really great website, so you can look at them there. This is Sonnenzimmer, a Chicago couple. One of them is a graduate from SAIC, the other one is a Swiss designer, graphic designer. We make zines, and I just flip through. This is JAB, Journal of Artist Book, regular artist book magazines, has been in existence for 20 years. Right now we're at JAB 41. In existence since 1994, printed by Brad Freeman at Columbia College down the street. So this is the last one, beautifully offset printed, and on each back of the journal are these envelopes, and within them are artist books that come with the magazine. What I want to talk about is Levi Sherman's one on the bottom, called Breathe. It's, again, this tiny strip printed on both sides. Similar to the utter simplicity you saw earlier with I'm So Fucking Beautiful, it consists of one single small strip of paper with one image and one phrase printed on either side in 11 unfolding repetition. Breathe references Eric Garner's 11 utterances before he was choked to death by the hands of New York City police, and it reflects on the relentless media saturation of the footage of his arrest. So what could be the value of a zine like this one? It's one that clearly reaches across diverse audiences. Mr. Garner's final words, I can't breathe, became a rallying cry for a protest movement and in street demonstrations. What value does a zine have that is as physically insignificant as this one, made at such a diminutive scale? It's maybe 2 centimeters by 15 centimeters. Is there anything it can achieve? It helps me start a conversation with students about what motivations they have in general for producing work, how interested they are in current politics and news, how much that can become the source material, what responsibilities they have as artists and citizens. Does the work re-inscribe violence by depicting it and by failing to provide a context for the person suffering from it, the person who died from it? Does the artist benefit from the depiction of another person's suffering, in this case someone who has less power in contemporary US culture, the artist was white, the victim was black? Critic might point out that Garner isn't memorialized here as a person with all the complexities of a life, but that the zine solely focuses on his death, reducing him to an illustration of violence, a route frequently taken by well-meaning, left-leaning white liberals who in reality are in no position to fully understand nor authentically portray the lives of people of color. Should white artists, and if so, how should they, use the cultural capital at their disposal, their visibility, and the space society gives them to amplify the voices of people of color and step aside to make room for them? This little zine leads to discussions, for example, of Kenneth Goldsmith's work. He remixed, I don't know if you know, the Michael Brown autopsy report in a very self-serving way. So lastly, I'm going to show you course zine production. This one was art therapy. This one was Punk 101, an art history class. This one was a photo class called sequencing. And lastly, this is Andy Yang, a zoologist who teaches in our liberal art department and who makes zines with his students because he thinks if they understand a scientific concept and make a zine about it and give that away to other people, there is so much more at stake for them and engagement rather than just writing a term paper, but to explore it in a visual way and then to give it away reinforces the concepts. I will leave out online zines that can be printed out, but one I want to mention is Black Girl's World. You can go to the website and then print out the zines. She makes fantastic zines. She's also a musician, a punk musician. So, sorry I had to rush so quickly.